The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Many of us who have experienced a near-death hope for a future in which everyone will embrace the notion of an afterlife, based not only on religious faith, but on the millions of near-death reports that have happened and continue to happen every day. It's been estimated, for instance, that some 770 NDEs occur in the United States alone every day. You can project that out to some 16,000 NDEs worldwide, more or less. With that many eyewitness reports, spiritually speaking, such free exchange of these reports could conceivably change the world. Our guest today, Scott Richardson, has been assisting a PhD neuroscientist in China, Shan Liang, to create a website in Chinese for those in China interested in learning about near-death experiences. Scott speaks fluent Mandarin Chinese, having served as an LDS missionary in the Republic of China, Taiwan. Scott is on the steering committee of Central Arizona IANDS. After the IANDS presenters who come from around the world to Phoenix have presented, Scott often invites them to stay at his house in order to get to know them better. Scott is also the co-author of a best-selling book, now in 12 languages, entitled 100 Ways to Motivate Others, How Great Leaders Can Produce Insane Results Without Driving People Insane. Scott's day job is as the executive director of an injury law firm in Phoenix, which handles cases involving recalled medical devices and dangerous drugs, including opioids. Scott, welcome to NDE Radio.
Welcome, Lee. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. And for our possible Chinese speakers, I will welcome them in Chinese, Dajia Hao, which is a way of saying everybody's good, everybody's cool.
Dajia Hao, I should commit that to memory. Scott, tell us, what first got you interested in near-death experiences?
Great question, Lee. So my grandfather had a near-death experience on one side and my grandmother on the other. So when I was growing up, I just figured, doesn't everybody have near-death experiences? And so I was actually surprised when other people were surprised about near-death experiences. But actually, how I got involved in IANDS was I was driving by a Unity Church one evening at Friday, and there was all these cars around there. I was going, why are all these cars around the Unity Church on Friday? And I was just led to go in, and I heard a presentation, and it turned out that the next month they were doing the International IANDS Conference in Scottsdale, and I volunteered, and the rest is history, as they say. So.
And my other logical question, I guess, is how did you get involved in going to Taiwan as a missionary? Well,
the way the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS Church, does it is you don't get a choice of where you go. And so I had actually taken some Mandarin Chinese in college, and I really wanted to go to Taiwan and the Republic of China, but I'd heard all these stories of missionaries that took 12 years of Spanish, and then they went, somewhere totally different. And so I didn't want to be disappointed. So I just said, hey, I'll go wherever I'm called. The place for me that I picked the spot on the earth I probably least wanted to go, and was psyched myself up for that. And then when I got to go to China, I was very happy.
That's great. And then how did you meet your friend in China who's building this website?
Yeah, great question. She actually reached out to IANDS, and it was at the last international conference, there was a reporter there from China, and I believe it was through the stories that reporter reported on that she contacted IANDS.
Mm-hmm. And your interest in China has continued, obviously, since you've gotten back. Tell us a little about the new leadership or the expansion of the leadership in China and what's going on there.
Well, that is definitely, to me, that may be the story of the decade and maybe the story of the century. First of all, I had a violin instructor back many years ago who was a genius in 10 different fields, and he predicted, he said, this century is going to belong to the Chinese, and that's what prompted me to actually take Mandarin Chinese in college. And I think he's going to turn out to be right. Anyway, but particularly what's been going on in the last 5 years with President Yi, nobody expected him to do what he's done. He was just sort of a compromise candidate. Let's give it to this guy, and he probably won't do too much damage. And he has surprised, I think, everyone. And so part of what he's done, I mean, his anti-corruption campaign was brilliant because there were so many corrupt officials that they have a special prison for high-ranking corrupt officials, and it's bursting at the seams right now. But he used that very skillfully to purge his opponent, and because there was so much corruption, and it got broad popular support. And so he's been very skillful in what he's done, consolidated his power. But when it comes to religion and spirituality, that's an area where the government had been loosening up because they had their other issues they were trying to deal with. Well, now as President Yi is consolidating his power, he's getting the Communist Party members, first of all, to toe the line. And that means we're good atheists, and near-death experiences apparently are being lumped in, or at least closely seen as religious, which isn't true at all. But therefore, if the government is against religion, especially for their party members who are supposed to be atheists, then by extension, if you report any kind of spiritual experiences, and definitely a near-death experience, that is suspect too. So, for instance, the neuroscientist over there, she was frustrated because a lot of what she did was being censored by the government internet censors. And so, but, I guess until you cited the statistics, I guess until more Chinese leaders, if they have their own experiences, maybe they'll change their mind. I don't know, but we'll just see what happens.
Well, when I saw you in Arizona, a week ago, I guess, we had a conversation about how the Chinese were experimenting with a social rating, something like, as you described it, the kind of credit rating that people have in this country.
Yeah.
And now, tell us a little about that.
Well, from the Chinese government perspective, all of the power of the computers and internet, this is something that they think. I'm going to give you the Chinese government perspective first.
Okay.
And so they won't censor me. So from their perspective, it's a great tool for promoting peace and harmony. And boy, that is an important theme that they just keep repeating over and over again for the value of the Communist Party and the government. And the way that they see that they can achieve it is that if people get out of line, and even in their thoughts or comments on social media, criticizing the government, criticizing things that shouldn't be criticized, and of course promoting things that the government thinks should not be promoted, which would be, subversive behavior, pornography, things like that. Any kind of posting or bad thoughts or whatever, they now are experimenting in a few provinces where your credit rating, and it's much bigger than that, but let's just call it your credit rating, will be adversely affected. So you might not be able to purchase anything on the internet, and eventually you might not be able to purchase things you want down the street. That's pretty coercive power there. And again, they see it, the government sees it as, well, no, this is just making sure that people have strong motivation to be peaceful and harmonious. And China went through, a convulsion during the Cultural Revolution, and even before that, there was great leaps forward where millions of people starved to death. And the government has a very strong interest, and most people there have very strong interest in peace and harmony, a lot more than, I would say, people in the United States who haven't been through those terrible, and I'm going to emphasize terrible times, where, people starving to death and people just, it's unthinkable what happened during those convulsions.
Sure. Well, China, as we know, is very technologically advanced these days. So does this mean that if someone were to email a pejorative comment about the government to somebody else, or say something on the telephone, or even if they went and bought a book that wasn't considered politically correct to the Chinese government, could they be downgraded in their credit rating on that account?
That's exactly. They're rolling it out on a test basis, but that's exactly what they're doing. And so it's, at one time, the thinking was that the Internet, you have a free exchange of ideas, that this was going to promote, more liberty, more freedom of expression, possibly democracy. And democracy, true democracy in China, is a dirty word. Okay. And so the leaders who were in favor of it, and there were some back in the 1989 incident, they're erased from history books. And so anyway, so the I guess it's now instead the Internet has been used to actually, from an American perspective, clamp down on people's freedom of expression. From the Chinese government perspective, no, we're just promoting peace and harmony. What are you guys talking about?
Yeah. Well, as I recall, they have pretty much banned that famous photograph of the man standing in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square.
Yeah, in fact, by mentioning it, we're getting this show censored in China, but keep going.
I'm sorry about that.
That's why I didn't use that terminology, but keep going.
The other thing is, and would be my concern that people might not be allowed to talk about, write about, or even go to the website that your friend is building. When it comes to near-death experiences, that might be something that that would downgrade someone's credit rating simply by being interested in the topic. Yeah.
Now, of course, that whole credit thing hasn't been rolled out nationwide yet, but everyone expects it to be sooner or later. So let's just say it was rolled out nationwide. Potentially, I don't know how many points it would cost you on your credit score, but yeah, that's exactly what's possible in the future.
Right. Now, let me ask you something else about this, because China is so interested in science and technology.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
What if we reach a point where we can scientifically demonstrate that near-death experience is not just a matter of faith or belief, but is actually an event that occurs in people's lives?
Yes.
Would they respond to that as opposed to a religious belief?
Yeah, in fact, that was the Chinese neuroscientist's whole point in collecting information about near-death experiences, is that she was hoping that would be that was the approach that she was using, and she was hoping that would, lead to governmental acceptance and possibly even, either benign approval or actual approval.
So, IANDS work with veridical experiences, things that people observe when they're out of body that they couldn't possibly know about if they're flatlining on the operating table or wherever. This is something that the Chinese might actually consider an appropriate area for investigation.
Absolutely. And for instance, I noticed the Missouri has a Journal of Medical. So I guess, what is it? The Missouri Medical Society has a series of articles on near-death experiences that were both looked at the scientific basis of it and were reports from medical doctors, physicians who'd had near-death experiences. So they combined those two. And it was, I haven't read the compilation yet, but apparently it's very fascinating. That's the kind of information I think that a Chinese government official could look at and go, well, let's see, these are, medical doctors, they're trained in all kinds of things, and they're reporting these experiences personally and in their patients. And then here's the research that shows, just like you said, Lee, this person had, one of the most famous instances was a Harvard neurosurgeon, Dr. Evan Alexander, where he literally had no brain function at all. They were going to unplug him from life support, and yet he had this incredible near-death experience and then returned to tell about it. And so I think that approach is probably the only approach that will work in China.
Wow. In that case, do you suppose that the leadership, which you say is, well, the communist point of view is atheism, would they be moved to change their attitudes if this could be proven to be a reality?
Yeah, I think well, actually, here's the point. That's an interesting question, because if you prove that the near-death experiences are scientifically verifiable, and yet, that would be the part that they would be accepting of. The next step is more problematic, which is, well, let's see, if you have this experience, and particularly if you're a good Chinese Party communist member and you happen to bump into God, how do you explain that?
Well, if they're interested in peace and harmony, there's no peace and harmony.
There you go.
Like bumping into God.
Maybe that's the way that maybe that's the key. Yeah.
Maybe we approach it by pointing out that the experience of the NDE is the ultimate peace and harmony, and therefore compatible with Chinese authoritarian regimes.
Particularly if God says, do whatever President Yi tells you to do.
Well, some might feel moved to get their credit rating up by saying such a thing.
There you go.
Well, in a case like China, then, it's probably even more important that NDE research be conducted because of the fundamental opposition to religion. So, if this NDE thing that you're working on can be promoted properly without offending anyone, this could be a really important turnaround for the Chinese thinking.
Yeah, and there is one area in in China that does allow much more freedom of expression. That's Hong Kong, and so people are free to, learn about it, study as much as they want, and there isn't any overt government suppression of that in Hong Kong. So maybe that becomes a place, free trade zone of ideas or something. Who knows?
Of course, if someone outside of Hong Kong goes into Hong Kong's internet and looks at something like NDEs, maybe that would still downgrade their credit rating.
Yeah, no, there's an internet wall, and people that used to be able to go around it, under it, over it easily now are getting, at least they're making it more difficult to do that. And again, they're at some point, they're going to get more than a notice or something. It'll be interesting. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Do you foresee a time when the government in China will feel so secure that corruption will have been eliminated, for instance, or, at least eliminated as much as is humanly possible, that they will begin to open up some of their controls, that they will feel more confident that the people can handle, a greater amount of information on these things?
Wow, that is a great question, Lee. And here's my answer. Hong Kong is the great experiment. And so the people there have relatively unfettered freedom of expression and thought. And so that is, the government of China keeps very close tabs on what happens there. They don't want that so-called local. It's not a true democracy, but boy, it's more than you got anywhere else in China. And yes. So I'll just call it the local democracy experiment. They're keeping close tabs on that, and they're hoping over time. Right now, they're hoping over time that they can just assimilate Hong Kong to how the rest of China works. But of course, the other possibility is, and it won't be when President Yi's term, I can guarantee you, but there will be future presidents of China, and if in Hong Kong they're able to have relative free expression of ideas and opinions, and have a limited form of democracy, and the people, and they don't riot in the streets, so to speak. They've had mass demonstrations, but they've always generally been peaceful. And so if that's able to happen, then who knows? Maybe at some point, way beyond President Yi's term, then that might be a model that future Chinese leaders may feel safe enough to adopt.
You had mentioned that when you mentioned that China was probably going to be the leading power of the future, it reminded me that when my father was alive, 30 years or so ago, in manufacturing, he went to China and said the same thing. He said this is the country of the future. He was always one to get up at 4 a.m. and go out for a run, and he would get up there and he'd see all these people out there doing qigong exercises, and was so impressed with the energy and the discipline of the Chinese people that he just marveled at it and said that they're going to be the ones to watch in the future. And my sister, on the other hand, was with a Quaker group who 30 years or so ago traveled to China on these American peace missions, and she was equally impressed. Now, I saw in the note you sent me that you actually can run tours over there. You take people over for a very reasonable price, and I would certainly be interested in doing something like that, and maybe some of our listeners would too. Maybe you could tell us a little about that.
Absolutely. So the Chinese government actually subsidizes 10-day trips, certain trips, for 10 days over to China, because they figure in 10 days you're going to have to start, you're going to have to spend money there. And so they actually have a program where you can spend 10 days in China for less than $1,000, and, do the math. You cannot, that's like $100 a day, and that includes airfare both ways. I mean, wow. You can't get over there in a canoe for that price. And so anyway, and that's food, hotels. I mean, it's an amazing deal. Lee, we can just write on this radio show. We're going to decide when you and I are going next, but maybe offline. I'm kidding. And,
yes.
and then, let's, if you've got some friends, and I'm volunteering to be your Mandarin speaking guide. And the thing is, we would go on that trip. You're going to go to places that they decide, but once you go to that, we have plenty of time to do what we want to do. And if I've got time, anyway, one of the interesting things I need to tell you is that one of the most important things is locating public restrooms that are Western style, because they still have public restrooms that are the Chinese style. In fact, that out in the hinterlands, that's the most common, where you, let's just say you you squat. I'll just say it. And I will relate. One time I went to one of these, and this is a long time ago, but anyway, I went to one, and I said, okay, here's the public pay toilets. And so I went inside, and I had to go so bad. I just, rushed in there, and then after I looked around, I said, oh, there's no paper. Now what do I do? And I got a little knock on the door, and this nice little lady, she opens the door, and then she hands me some paper and said, this will be like, 50 cents. And I said, at that point, I would have paid her $50,000 for this stuff. and so I said, now that's an interesting pay toilet experience,
Yes, especially when someone of the opposite sex is the one handing you the paper.
Exactly.
Well, I've been in bathrooms like that in Turkey and in the Middle East, and so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Although I don't think I ever had a woman knock on the door and make an offer like that. I try to prepare before going into the toilet to have everything necessary, including the strength of muscle to hold it. I mean, this is how they do it, but for most of us, especially in advanced years, it's sometimes a challenge.
Right.
Well, that sounds great. This has been a wonderful show, Scott, and unfortunately we are out of time, but we'll be in touch about this, and if we can work something out, we'll let the listeners know, if they'd like to join us. So, Scott, perhaps you'd like to tell the audience how they can find your book.
Oh, well, Amazon is still the best way, and the the book, it's interesting that if you look for books on how to motivate yourself, there are literally hundreds. But when it comes to motivating others, there's only a handful. And this one, 100 Ways to Motivate Others, How Great Leaders Can Produce Insane Results Without Driving People Crazy, is still a bestseller. Like I said, it's in several languages worldwide. And I tell people, if you have a problem with motivating somebody in your life, if you can't find the answer in there, I'll give you a free book.
Okay. Thanks again to our guest, Scott Richardson, for sharing his observations on China with us today. If you'd like to listen again to this or any of our past shows, go to our website at nderadio.org. And for more information about the work of IANDS, check out that website, IANDS.org. And tune in next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.